This is the Global News Rodeo with Arun Chowdhury and Forrest Lovette.
Hi, and welcome to your Global News Rodeo, a roundup of world events as curated by the show's own Forrest Lovette. Let's go. Item 1 in the eco chamber, eco-fascism on the rise. And if you know anything about the program, you know that this is an issue we track a lot. Deutsche Welle is reporting on the greenwashing of the far right and growing eco-fascism. The latest massacre in Buffalo, New York saw yet another radicalized white male target racial minorities while also writing a desperate and pathetic racist diatribe. In the writings, the shooter alluded to natural conservation and degradation of the natural environment from mass migrations as his justification. This is similar to the writings of the shooters in 2019 Christchurch, New Zealand massacre, who labeled himself as an ethno-nationalist eco-fascist, and the 2019 El Paso, Texas massacre. Cassidy Thomas of Syracuse University says eco-fascists told Deutsche Welle, eco-fascists are tied up in racist theories and believe that the degradation of the natural environment leads to the degradation of their culture and their people. Far-right politicians are also shifting their alignments with the topic of climate change, moving away from outright denial. Politicians like Marine Le Pen in France embrace climate protection in her most recent presidential campaign, and the far-right AfD in Germany has stated they intend to embrace climate change as a recruiting tool. I just want to say two things about this. One, on the show, we talk about this a lot in terms of the fact that youth politics are not always left-wing, and this is something that, people sort of think based on their 20th century experiences, but we know that it's not so true. And the other thing is sort of how green... It's hard to know even what Green Party's agendas can be, because green politics, even if it's not being enacted, has been adopted in the entire spectrum of parties. And so when everyone is sort of saying the same thing, how does one define things as being different? I think you actually see this not only as a problem in terms of a way to boost far right parties, but also as sort of confusion on the general center left and left coalitions about what people's roles are in things. That was confusing. That was not a good editorial, but we're going to slide into item 2. Item 2, NATO so fast, Turkey blocks Finland and Sweden membership. Politico Europe is reporting Turkish President Erdogan has doubled down on his objections to a NATO membership fast track for Finland and Sweden. Last Wednesday, the ambassadors of Finland and Sweden submitted their formal request to join the treaty organization. Following the request was a meeting of the North Atlantic Council, the governing political body of NATO, who were unable to reach unanimity because of the holdout by Ankara, meaning the accession process was halted. Erdogan addressed the council declaring, "Today, we are effectively one of the countries that gives the most support to the activities of this alliance. But this does not mean that we will unquestioningly say yes to every proposal brought before us." Turkish leaders criticize both member states of supporting Kurdish groups such as the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, which is classified as a terrorist organization by Ankara, although not by the committee program. We have always found that to be a bit of a sticky situation. And the other thing I will say is the fact that this is happening out in public and not behind closed doors shows that Turkey seems to really want to get the highest price that they can get for this. And that just sort of seems like an interesting thing to note in terms of negotiations inside NATO. When people just want things, they ask you for them in closed doors. When people want things and they want to exact a toll on you by asking those things, that's when they make that ask public. So it's something to think about if you're someone who likes to think about things like that. Item 3, same old song and tragic dance, no investigation into journalists' killing. Democracy Now! Is reporting that the Israeli military will not open an investigation into the death of Shireen Abu Akleh, a journalist for Al Jazeera. Witnesses say that Abu Akleh was killed by an Israeli soldier on May 11th while covering a raid in the town of Jenin in the occupied West Bank. I've actually been there. Al Jazeera is reporting the release of video which corroborates the story told by witness accounts. Filmed by a Jenin resident, the film shows a quiet scene with no evidence of prior fighting, as was told by the Israeli military. Palestinian officials say they have retrieved the fatal bullet but will not hand it over to the Israeli military, as was requested, citing a lack of trust from previous experiences. That's putting it mildly. Israeli newspaper Haaretz reports that the Criminal Investigation Division of military believes treating Israeli soldiers as suspects will lead to opposition within the Society of Israel. Item 4, conservatives over down under. Labor carries lead into election. And Forrest, good job Good job. I'm glad to see you putting your university education to hard work in titles like that. That's working well. In fact, I'm even going to say it again. It was so good. Conservatives over, down under. Labor carries lead into election. The Guardian is reporting on the upcoming Australian general election. The Labor Party have held on to a shrinking lead in opinion polls before Saturday's election, but the party is weary of popping the champagne too soon, as the 2019 election loss and false prediction of a Labor victory continues to haunt them. Although Albanese and the Labor Party have promised to tackle the climate crisis by building more efficient transmission lines and reducing industrial emissions, Independent and Green Party candidates have enjoyed increased support and attention by offering a stronger climate action. As Australia faces a housing affordability crisis, just quick aside editorial, housing is one of the number one polling issues everywhere. It's not just Australia or Europe or the United States. It's everywhere. As Australia faces a housing affordability crisis, Labor has run on a platform of wage increases, addressing the gender wage gap, increasing manufacturing, and introducing a $392 million housing equity scheme. On the other side, incumbent Prime Minister and handsome rascal Scott Morrison and his government, the Conservative Liberal National Coalition, are vying to disprove the election predictions once again and retain their parliamentary majority. And they might. These are survivors. And Scott Morrison is somehow the Teflon man down under, although that isn't as good as when you did it in your title, Forrest. So I don't know.